Welcome to Lecture 12. This week's readings deal with the effectiveness of court-based programs. Society is often very critical that the police don't do enough to solve crime or to fight crime, and that prisons and probation, they don't work. It's very interesting, though, that very little public attention is ever focused on the effectiveness of the courts. While the courts are probably the most easily observable part of the criminal justice system, and they have the most influence overall on what happens to defendants in the criminal justice system, there's been very little research on the effectiveness of court-based operations or programs. In fact, most research on the courts, as you've read in this course already, focused on how the courts operate and the effects of these operations on equitable outcomes. So, are African Americans treated differently than whites, etc. But as you'll see, especially in this week's readings, very few research studies have examined whether or not the operations of the courts actually reduce further crime. And there are several reasons for this, and these include that lawyers are not trained in the social sciences. Where you do have some social science-based people in policing and in corrections, you really don't have that in the legal field. And then prosecutors and judges are elected officials. They are even more suspicious of outsiders than other types of criminal justice agency heads, and they don't want any bad press because they want to get reelected. And then most social scientists prefer studying offenders, the police, and corrections. If you look across PhD programs in criminal justice, you see that there are very few that actually have a concentration in the courts. And then lastly, the public and the media do not focus on the courts. You don't have much attention directed towards them. It tends to be mostly focused on the police and to a lesser extent on corrections. So, for those of you wanting to go on to pursue a doctorate and have a research career, here is an entire area of the criminal justice system that's almost completely unstudied and wide open for you to build a career of research upon. So for our readings, since we're dealing with the effectiveness of the courts, we're back to good old John Worrell, just like we were with the policing chapters. 3 different chapters from John Worrell dealing with an evaluation of all the existing research on the effectiveness of the courts. The first one deals with programs and strategies that are based on prosecutors and prosecutors' decisions to act. In the next chapter, he evaluates crime control programs that are in the courts, but usually just outside the courts in some way. So, for instance, criminal diversion. So when somebody gets taken into the court, they suspend charging that person. Say, for instance, you got arrested for a DUI. The prosecutor, will decide not to prosecute you for 1 year. If you complete alcohol counseling within 1 year and don't get any new arrests and come back, I'll drop the charges. That's what diversion would be. Shaming, where they have them wear a sign that says I'm a thief or I'm a child molester. Restorative justice, which is having the offender give restitution and an apology to the victim. So things like that. Problem-based courts, so specifically drug courts, domestic violence courts, community courts, those types of things he addresses in this chapter. And then in the third chapter, Worrell goes over all of the existing research on tough sentencing and deterrence. So specifically, sentencing strategies, what types of sentences produce what type of results as far as reducing crime. And I'll give you a hint already. For these 3 chapters, the majority of what he's going to be saying over and over and over again is, we don't know. And he spends more time describing the different types of programs that he's looking for evaluations on, and less time actually going over the evaluation research because there just isn't any. There's a few exceptions throughout these chapters, so make sure you pay attention to that. But overall, this is a very under-researched area. Okay, so don't forget quiz number 12 this week, and writing assignment number 3 is also due this week. And as always, if you have problems or concerns, email me.